Hey guys, Doug here with Hollywood Rodents. Tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about the legislative process and how the things that have to be done in Montana for us to be able to own snakes and reptiles and things that are other than that are on the prohibited list, or on the basically on the prohibited list, things that just are not legal. I'm going to shoot the first part of this, and then I'm going to jump over and shoot a Patreon video too. So realistically, guys, when you look at the list of things that are legal in Montana, when you pull up Fish, Wildlife, and Parks website and you look at the three lists, there's three lists. There's prohibited, which means they're not giving you a permit, period. They realistically cannot be owned by private individuals. If you're a zoo, you can get a permit. If you're a roadside menagerie, you can get a permit. And both of those come with a lot of red tape and a lot of stuff. Or you can prove an educational need, which is why we have our YouTube channel. This is why we're doing this part of it. If it was just simply about rats and producing high quality feeders and some ball pythons and stuff like that, guys, we wouldn't need this YouTube channel. But we're doing this so that we can prove that our business has a need, and that we do an amount of education worthy of us being able to own animals that are on the prohibited list. So I'm going to talk to you guys kind of about what I have found out, what I have figured out, what I've pieced together, and been able to sort of come up with as an answer for the legislative issues that we face in Montana. Truth is, Montana adopted the Lacey Act, okay? That puts a lot of really cool animals on the prohibited list, especially in Montana. But when you look at the science behind it, they can't survive here. Reticulated pythons. If one was to get out, if you had a 20-foot retic that weighed 200 pounds and it got out and it was outside in Montana, man, when it starts to get into October and November and our temperatures dip down into the 50s during the day, that animal's gonna die. They can't survive here. So the Lacey Act was really designed to keep any wild species that could thrive in the environment illegal, so that they could control the number of them that get that have the potential to be released into the wild. Now, we all know that Florida has a huge problem with the Burmese pythons and the rock pythons, because it was Hurricane Andrew that leveled the two largest Burmese python breeding facilities in the country, like 2 miles from the Everglades. So a perfect storm hit an animal that is adaptable and released them into an environment that is near mirror image of their natural environment, guys. That was an act of God or an act of nature. I'm not trying to get all political and talk about who you should pray to or any of that kind of stuff, but guys, that was an act of nature that happened. But because of it, states had to react, and those states that have marshes and have swamps and stuff needed some protection. Yes, there were some pet owners that turned some of these giant snakes loose, and they are incredible predators. They are, by all accounts, decimating the native wildlife in Florida, and that's just kind of how it is. It sucks, but it happens. It has happened, okay? But most of the animals that are on the Lacey Act couldn't survive here in Montana. They just couldn't. We get too cold. Snakes that don't brumate, or reptiles that don't brumate, they would never survive here. So what has to happen is we as a collective, we as a society, or as a group of people in the hobby, especially breeders, we have to come up with a plan and a set of guidelines to hopefully get a legislator on our side to help change the law, to get them to repeal the Lacey Act and get a permitting process in place. So I've posted in some Facebook groups, and I've talked about this in some things in a bunch of different forums. None of us think that you should be able to go in and buy a Burmese python that gets to 20 feet long in Petco or PetSmart as your first snake. I remember in the early 2000s when you could walk in to Petco and buy a Burmese python for $40, and it was an albino, and in the same store right next to it was a normal ball python for $200. Okay, that was in 1999. That's how long I've been playing with snakes, not necessarily as a business and not really even involved in the hobby for quite a while. But I've kept ball pythons I kept ball pythons for a long time. I bred them a long time ago. I kept a couple Burmese. I love the Burmese pythons. I think they're cool. They are amazing animals. I had an African rock python at one point in time. Worst mistake I ever had. Worst mistake I've ever made with a snake. I had one of the very first blood pythons imported into this country from Borneo in 1999. I've kept carpet pythons before. I think they're really cool animals. They're great pets. Carpet pythons are legal, by the way, but rock pythons are not. Burmese pythons are not. All of the crocodile family, all of the alligators, all those things are illegal in Montana. You almost cannot get a permit for them. So we as a society have to come up with a set of rules, and we have to kind of govern that ourselves in order to make some legislative changes, and that's the only way it's going to happen. I don't normally get on any of my social media platforms and preach about donating to any sort of backers or anything like that, but USARK is the only ones fighting for us. We could form a society here in Montana and take it on a grassroots level. Sorry guys, I got Mary, the short-tailed python that you saw that's in another video. She just finished eating, and the lid is off of her tub, and I'm thinking she's looking for seconds, and she's thinking I might be kind of tasty, but I'm not big enough I'm too big for her to eat. But anyway, she's a sweetheart when it's not feeding day. But anyhow, that's a different video. So we as a collective in the industry and in the hobby have to work together. I'm not usually a big fan of breeder societies where there's an entry fee and all kinds of stuff, but this might be a situation where we need one so that we can come up with a permitting process that we come up with, that we write, that we have some say in. Otherwise, nothing's ever going to change. So anyhow, guys, that's my little rant on that. After the first of the year, I'm going to be posting in all of the Montana Facebook groups, trying to put together people who want to help me and see what we can do. The head of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, the guy that's in charge of enforcement, is open to a discussion. He's open to a dialogue where we help with some legislative changes, but we have to come together as a group. It cannot be one person here, one person there, and it cannot be us just shotgunning ideas. It has to be cohesive, it has to make sense, and it has to be backed by science. The process of getting an animal listed, which I've sent in the paperwork for tarantulas because nobody's done it. I sent in 6 sets of paperwork for the most common genuses in the hobby, and they allowed me to do that. Instead of listing every single genus and species as its own set of paperwork, which would have taken me a lifetime to get submitted, they let me do it on 6, okay? And it's a genus, and then all of the subspecies, they're all listed, and I took all that stuff from the internet, and I did my damnedest to make sure that all that information was correct, and I did that with no help. And even though I've asked for help, nobody wanted to do it. So if tarantulas become unregulated in Montana, you're welcome, because there's several people that breed them. There's several people who have a business doing it, who've been breaking the law without even knowing it or without caring to do any research. So guys, that's the kind of stuff that draws negative attention to our hobby, and that's the kind of stuff that's going to make it very difficult for us to get some of these other animals approved if so many people are just showing disregard for the law. So anyhow, guys, that's my little rant. I didn't mean for it to really go off on that tangent, but that's what it is. I submitted the paperwork for tarantulas because I want to keep them, I want to breed them, I want to sell them. I want something that I want to offer in my store, along with the ball pythons and the short-tailed pythons that we have currently. There's some really cool stuff out there, and we want to branch out into some of the stuff that isn't every day. And if you own a business doing this, you need to be looking at that stuff. So anyhow, guys, peace.